Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here. Today I'm reacting to Black Sails Season 3, Episode 8. The reaction will be a highlight reel of my first time watching the episode, and the review will be a scene-by-scene analysis following the rewatch. Let's get right into it.
Oh great, a clock. I love seeing them. They don't give me Vietnam flashbacks or anything like that. Why would they? Nothing wrong with clocks.
I can't understand how you cannot understand.
Because you've never known love. That's why, Vane.
You have no...
And we will give you the comfort you need.
I mean, he's a former slave. He's going to be biased.
Is it Featherstone's man?
It is. Here he comes.
Okay, what's going to happen? Oh, we're cutting to Jack? Poor Jack.
It's for you.
Oh, you made a friend.
For the company.
You did make a
I
friend.
suspect I'll be leaving shortly.
Oh.
Despair some of the poor bastard will take my place soon enough. Perhaps someday the whole damn boulangerie.
He's probably thinking to himself, that was a really clever line and no one was around to hear it. Oh, Jack in chains. I don't like that.
And then repeat phonetically what he said to the men. A few months ago, all
They're
the
so
ladies on
cute.
this ship was cook.
Something tells me that isn't the end to Sylvie's darkness. Who we got? What happened?
What the fuck happened?
Yeah.
They chose them from among us to be tortured and killed.
Yo.
And that one was the one doing the shooting.
I thought that was going to be Elle for some reason. I thought we were getting another scene with the governor. Imagine being paid to just literally lie in a bed all day doing that. The actors have it good.
Hiding from.
The locations are stunning. I've said it a million times before and I'll continue saying it till the end of the series. Just stunning looking.
Do you speak Spanish?
Simply because the governor decided to put his trust in you, I have no intention of doing the same.
He has been so
Situation
sexist.
is no concern. Ladies.
What a creep. I've grown so unaccustomed to all these sets.
And when it does, all hell is going to break loose.
So how is Sylvie... Yeah, well, what are we going to do? How is Sylvie going to prevent this? Oh, very interesting. And then that's going to embolden the relationship between Sylvie and Maddie. Excellent writing. Oh, that light on her eyes. They thought of every single little detail for the cinematography here. It's insane. Like, they have the lights look that way because of the wood beams overhead.
Now let him go.
What is it with every woman in this show being so beautiful? Along with the men, obviously. He was kind of put in his place, but at the same time, it was incredibly smart of him to have the wherewithal to even think of going to her to begin with.
The ship beneath bare poles waiting silently and visibly for a signal to return.
Yeah. As we saw.
Determined to rebuild what had been taken away. I was 13 years old,
Whoa.
and I was determined.
Hurt myself.
But Jesus, did I make up a lot of ground to catch you?
All you know about me is what I want you to know.
Yeah. Great callback to what he said in the previous episode. Brilliant, Jack. Great fight scene. Great fight scene. Are you kidding me? Jack indeed had it neck and neck. And oh my god, the sequence? Filmmaking wise, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That was insane. I don't care how much of that was CGI. That was absolutely fantastic. And it's still going. Oh, this is giving me Children of Men vibes. Oh my god. Great transition. That was obviously digitally altered, it doesn't matter. Because it was so good, I was so in it. I was so in it. Oh, this is a joy. This is a joy to be watching. I am completely in love. This season is nuts. Holy shit. Oh, I haven't seen something that good since Mr. Robot. A long take that deserves to be a long take. Yeah, of course he wasn't gonna die, it's Jack. Oh, I love our group. I love Vane looking after Jack. Oh, I love their relationship so much. I love these characters so much. That sequence is absolutely phenomenal. I love the way they introduced it as just a bog standard scene, shot reverse shot, and what it built to naturally. No, Vane. No, 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 no. You are not dying just after I said I loved your relationship with Jack. Oh, please, no. What are they gonna do? Okay. Well, he's going to live till the end of the episode at least. Yeah, I mean... like, the show did the job of explicitly saying it, so...
It is over then. We move forward.
Yep. Oh, that is brutal. Oh. Oh.
I thought you said that no one could see us from here.
The spyglass.
It means our secrets are no longer ours.
Mm-hmm.
It means there is a spy among us.
Yeah, has to be. Throwback to 301. There's only one name you need to look for, and that's Charles Vane.
Charles Vane swinging over Nassau is a statement we cannot afford to be made.
Jesus.
You cannot stay.
If Charles knew we were even contemplating jeopardizing the grander effort to save him, he'd kill us all.
He would. Like he would.
The governor won't be able to hang Vane out of fear of losing the street.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. It's insane how their combined efforts work together. Thank God Flint is back to a point where he's actually seeing reason. I love this show so much. I love this show so much. Top 10, absolutely, no question.
Both you and I are of the greatest sort.
No, I'm not.
Literally weakened by Nassau.
Is the embodiment of that temptation for you. It is self-evident.
I can't wait to see their scene together. First word that came to mind was exquisite, and yeah. I said it there, but I'll just reiterate it. Like, it's without question a top 10 show for me. Absolutely. And, well, that's the reaction. So here's the review. So our opening scene, right before we get into talking about Anne's entrance and the exposition we're getting, that conversation between Flint and Vane is remarkable, because we know where Vane has come from to get him to this place, but more importantly, we know what Flint has been through to get him to this place. So we see Vane commenting on the attributes of domesticity that Flint is adhering to. And for Vane to say that, for me, these things represent comfort, and to me, comfort is death. Comfort is death in the sense that comfort is the focal point of submission. Give us your submission and we'll give you comfort. So for him to say that if there is any part of me that seeks comfort, I would intentionally try to shut that down altogether is really, really powerful stuff. And it does so much, it tells us so much about the type of person that Vane is in that moment. And indeed, to a degree, it tells us a little bit about how Flint is as well. And despite it all, both men do respect each other as much as they do. Just so much depth in just a handful of lines. It's really remarkable. So then when Anne does come into the room, we get the exposition there that they seem to be out of harm's way with regards to any retaliation from Rogers or anyone even related to them, that they have truly secured themselves a bit of safety, given that because Anne has handed over the cash, that they can remain hidden in a way to kind of come out of the darkness to deploy their move. And as Anne says, we can't afford not to guess. This is going to be a life or death situation, potentially for Jack. So whatever their move is, we need to act it as quickly as possible. And then for Billy to come in at the scene's end and say that Featherstone's men are on their way, giving us that bit of intrigue, giving us a little bit of a cliffhanger that will then bring us set up into the next scene. It's great at adding suspense into an episode that already has a good bit of suspense that has been deliberately made at the end of 307. So to see them kind of continue on with the storyline right away, to give us exposition right away, and then to give us our own kind of internal cliffhanger right away is really intriguing from an audience member perspective. Following this, right before Jack gets transported, we have that fantastic scene of him talking to the mouse, and of course, basically talking to himself when he says, today the crumb, tomorrow the loaf, and soon after perhaps the whole damn boulangerie. Like him talking about that level of ambition. And of course, if you're watching this reaction, you've already seen the episode, you know what's going to be happening. You see what backstory we're going to be getting with Jack and, of course, his actions throughout the episode itself. But having that small little moment where, of course, it's a little bit of a save the cat trope in that we're seeing him being kind to an animal, and doesn't that make them likable? I can look past every bad thing Jack Rackham has done as a result of that, because he gave him a mouse crumbs. What kind of a bad guy does that? All joking aside, though, I love seeing that he is able to maintain his composure to a large degree in a scene like this. That Jack is... I love this character so much. I have to end whatever point I was just making there. I love this character so much. Like, he is truly... Oh god, if I were to think like top 10 characters in any TV show, I genuinely think he might be there. He's funny and likable and charismatic, and yeah, that stuff is great. He's also not a morally fantastic character. There's a lot of bad to him that is inexcusable. And to me, that makes him a deeper character, more complex, and he represents what life in Nassau must have been like, and how he is ambitious and he is looking after number one, but it's not necessarily coming from a place of malice. Just again, to use that term, it is from a place of self-preservation. But then we also see the values he has towards characters like Anne. He'll do what he can to protect himself, but he's not any sort of sadist. He's too composed for that. And I do understand that in regular society, the term not a sadist isn't exactly the same as being a Nobel Prize winner. But in this kind of a world, it would be easy for him to kind of gain a sense of power for himself by committing those kinds of acts, but he doesn't. You can't even say that he's necessarily, let's say, a Littlefinger character from Game of Thrones, where, you know, he's playing this political game one step ahead of everybody else and being devious and dastardly in that kind of a way for a power trip. He does things like that, but they're not necessarily from that sort of place. But yeah, I mean, as I said before, I have seen at this point of recording episodes 9 and 10 already, so I know so much of what are going to be my favorite moments of dialogue still yet to come. But as it stands, like, just that little interaction there, seeing the way he talks to himself, kind of with the mask down, and you see how much of it wasn't even really a mask at all, that Jack is sincerely this... He's this likable, he's this likable, he's intelligent, he's introspective, he's perceptive, he's sexy, he's all these things that make him such a compelling watch to us as an audience member that I just absolutely love every single time he's on screen. And of course, in the next scene where we see Rogers and Jack speak to one another, and Rogers explains what the deal is to Jack with regards to Jack now being transferred along with the money to the Spanish. As soon as Rogers mentions that Anne has been unscathed, we see the wheels turning in Jack's head. He hasn't fully figured it out, maybe in this exact moment, that Anne has something larger planned, but he definitely knows that something isn't right and something doesn't add up clearly in this situation. So, I mean, seeing where that ends up going is, of course, to come, and we'll deal with that when we deal with it. But again, we're getting that level of perception, aren't we, in a little moment like that? Like, and it's so funny, like, that actor is doing a great job because he's able to contort the face of Jack in a way that when he looks confused, it looks hilarious. But when Jack is confused, he is still so far ahead of so many other characters in this world, and indeed just actual other characters that we follow as well. I said it before and I'll say it again, like the duo of Jack and Vane, the two of them together could take over the world. Like, you know, Sylvie and Flint, they're doing their own thing, but Jack and Vane, like, just chef's kiss. And Anne there as well, don't worry, not forgetting Anne. Our next scene with Maddie and Sylvie talking. First of all, love Maddie as a character, love the fact that she's in our fold now, and seeing the two of like seeing her and Sylvie interact is just absolutely fantastic. Even if the relationship were to remain strictly platonic, it's still one that I absolutely love seeing. I really, really do. The fact that they just understand each other so well, and we get a really great bit of exposition. I missed the first time around. I was actually a little bit confused by it as to why we got the lingering shot of one of the crewmen looking back at the island through the spyglass, and then it's told to us that the Groot has a figure out that from a particular position, our ship is invisible to the beach, but the beach is still visible to us, or the island as a whole, not just the beach. Which again, like having that sort of what I'm assuming is accuracy in a show like this is such great attention to detail, and it's again just interesting on a more kind of like philosophical idea, like questioning the actual like physics of it and our placement in the world, because so much of this is to do with our place in the world. Like even the idea that the Marooners Island could be a place that England hasn't truly discovered yet. Like for us in the 21st century, that's such a novel concept to try to wrap our heads around, comparing it to the 18th century. So for Maddie to underline that notion in saying, in questioning how is it that we can exist and not exist at the same time, is really great world building in that regard. And then we have the actual conversation she has with Sylvie that continues on, in which she questions the efficacy of Sylvie, given the fact that, well, his actions last night were dramatic, to say the least, and it certainly does indicate that he is going down a particularly dark road. Sylvie is adamant that he is fine and his head is clear, and Maddie makes it clear in the sense that she's concerned, because what this plan necessitates is the strict alliance between her men and his men. So were his mind to not be clear, that could end up really being a spanner in the works. And given what's going to happen in the remainder of this episode, given the main plot point that is now going to be introduced for Sylvie, well, let's just say she does truly have every right to be concerned. So we get the setup for the plot point for Sylvie there in the very next scene, in which we see that one of the former slaves is the one responsible for 4 of our men being tortured and killed back in the early days of us winding up on the island, as a means to an end of ensuring that our guys were completely safe to be around. I think it was great to bring in that particular plot point, as it does show us that actions truly have consequences, that although we didn't actually see the effects of what it was like for our men to be locked up, and of course, despite the fact that all of this is just a means to an end, and all of this is part and parcel with trying to negotiate with the Marooners and trying to form our alliance with them, there is naturally going to be casualties, particularly at the beginning of that, where the Marooners had no idea who we were. So to see the consequences of that conflict still very much present in the eyes of the crewmen, not only does that work on a storytelling front with regards to then how this is going to lead with characterizing Sylvie for the rest of the episode and then Maddie for the rest of the episode. Alongside that, it does add a very tangible sense of realism to the world, in that, again, actions do have consequences, and that the crewmen are not going to forget that these men who they are trying to work with on the ship are literally responsible for killing some of our friends who we've been friends with for quite a considerable amount of time, men who we have been through very literally hell and high water together. So that's a great... I love the fact that they made that specifically a plot point. They didn't just make it a case where the man who's kneeling on the ground beaten up, they just got into a random tiff with one of our guys. That this is a direct result of something that had happened in previous episodes off screen, I thought was a great addition to the storyline. So our next scene with Max and Georgia in bed together seems to very much operate as a direct response to what Mapleton had spoken about in 307, in which make sure that the only thing you owe a person for their service, when it's this type of service, make sure the only thing you owe them is a fee. And it's very interesting to see Georgia, who we learn is like a new girl, to the fold, how her as a newbie is, quite bluntly trying to weasel information out of Max, and Max is like, yeah, I mean, it was going to be impossible in that kind of a regard. Max not only knows every single game there is to play, her entire business is dependent on her knowing all the games and even creating games of her own. So it was very interesting in that regard just to see Max being so iron-willed, even when it's coming at the end of a very highly emotionally intense dynamic that she is just in the middle of having. So yeah, again, something like that, just great reinforcement for Max's character. And again, it's a great follow-on from what her and Mapleton were talking about the episode before. So immediately after this, we then get the scene in which Eleanor is detailing to Max that the plan seemingly seems to have gone the way they wanted it, that Anne was not harmed and the cash was secured. And of course, as soon as Max learns that Anne did not put up any sort of fight whatsoever, that something has definitely gone awry with the overall plan. So it's very interesting to consider things from the perspective of Max, that, when you think about it, she was fully prepared to deal with the emotional onslaught of Anne possibly being killed as a result of this entire exchange, or rather the lack of exchange. So to see her then realize that something is amiss with all of this, that it would be ridiculous for Anne to not retaliate, even were there to be 1,000 men, let alone simply 8 men, is a really great exposition, and I suppose maybe you could call it the inciting incident for the duration of the episode, at least insofar as Max's storyline goes. So yeah, I really enjoyed seeing that. And again, at this point, as you probably know, any interaction between Max and Elle at this point, I'm just always going to enjoy. And the fact that it also happens to be about Anne, the other character who I love so much, is just, yeah, really, really great stuff. So then we get the great scene between Rogers and Jack, in which Jack makes it very clear to Rogers that the possibility of Jack landing in Havana and then being hung by the Spanish state is still only a possibility. It's not something that is completely set in stone, given the fact that, well, Anne is presumably still alive, and where there's a will, there's a way, and when there's an Anne, there's a saved Jack. And for Rogers to then, make it explicitly clear that there is a number of routes that we have decided upon, but only one of them is going to be the actual route, whereas the rest of them are ruses, to which Jack seems to be somewhat deterred by that, but not entirely so. Again, really speaks to the level of faith that Jack has in Anne's ability. And again, it's a great setup then for where the rest of the episode is going to go, and that Rogers is truly in a position where he feels that he has outsmarted Jack and the rest of the crew. He feels as though this plan is absolutely watertight, that there's no way he's at all going to be infiltrated. And again, even though Rogers is not so naive as to think that Anne couldn't possibly be a threat whatsoever, he is in a place right now where he's secure the fact that both him and his men are completely safe from the threat of Anne. So to have that set up as something that is then going to be undermined by the remainder of the episode, from a writing perspective, I thought was very, very strong. So the scene between Chamberlain as well as Elle and Max did a great job of showing that Max is going to be very proactive in trying to get on top of things, given the fact that she knows that Anne and Flint together have something up their sleeves, and Elle, of course, backing up that point, and sees him come against the fact that, well, we already have a plan underway as far as the English are concerned. Why would we in any way whatsoever try to make ourselves vulnerable just because you have a hunch that something might be the result of one rogue pirate as well as one other pirate who left hours ago and up until now was just presumed to be a ghost pirate? And yeah, I suppose when you frame it that way, it does look ridiculous. But of course, with us as the audience having being privy to knowledge that other characters don't have, we know that things are not going to end well for England in this regard, for their forces. And also the character of Chamberlain. Oh my, like the way he talked to Elle was disgusting. We've seen him being very condescending in 303, I believe. Yeah, but like that innuendo he makes where he says that Rogers may have put his trust in you, like the way he says that is just so it's just so gross, and it does a good job of illustrating presumably what Elle has kind of come up against a lot throughout her life, being a woman in this kind of a world. But again, just the level of condescension that she has to be met with in a moment like that, it does a great job from a writing perspective of then acting as a compare and contrast to the strength and reasonability and rationality that Elle does actually have. Even if she doesn't have it all the time. It's Elle, but hey, if she was perfect, she wouldn't be a good character. And speaking of Elle not being a perfect character, we then see her walk up to Hornigold and make it very clear to him that he has his pride and she has her pride, but both of them need to cast both of those aside were they to actually save one another in this particular moment. So she does have the self-awareness to know that she is a prideful character just as much as any of the male characters. So our next scene, in which Sylvie and Maddie work together in order to solve the Mr. Dobbs situation, was very, very strong. I loved the final interaction between Maddie and Sylvie there, in which there was the operating subtext. So on the surface we had Maddie making it clear to Sylvie that you don't have to worry about my man speaking out because I am in control of my men. My men do what I say. And of course that has the subtext delivering the idea to Sylvie of you need to keep your men in line because whatever it is that I tell my men, that is exactly what my men do. No ifs, ands, and or buts about it. Whereas for Sylvie's men, because they are Sylvie's men, there is still some remaining work to do. So dialogue such as that helps us understand that even though that particular aspect of the plot seems to be resolved, there's still more to come with regards to Sylvie needing to figure out how to have a better grip on the emotions of his crewmen. And given the fact that this is an episode that opened with Sylvie saying to Maddie that she does not have to be concerned about him descending into darkness, but of course we know exactly what it is that he saw, what he said to Flint in the previous episode. If Sylvie is to try to maintain control of his men, but also not succumb to the inherent sense of power that comes with him operating as a captain, well, let's just say it's not going to be an easy scenario for Sylvie to try to navigate. So again, I think for me, the scene did a great job of building tension and then having the release of tension. The moment in which Maddie and Sylvie are holding the knife and looking at each other did a great job of that. And I mentioned in the reaction how much I enjoyed the cinematography of that scene, seeing the light coming through the beams of the scaffolding overhead. And in general, again, I think it's a great plot progression for Sylvie in this episode. I think it's moving him along that episode arc just a little bit further and further with a scene such as that. And again, it's great reinforcement of the type of character that Maddie is, that despite her being a girl so young, she's not the youngest either, but at the same time she isn't exactly the oldest, and she is very much in a new situation here. She very much is in uncharted waters because this is so completely unprecedented for their community to be working with a white crew as closely as they are. So to see that reinforcement and somewhat progression of her character, particularly with that last bit of dialogue where we see just how competent and confident she is in her role as a captain, was really terrific to see. So what happens next is a scene that I really did not appreciate on my first time watching this episode, but given the rewatch, oh, what a fantastic bit of dialogue we got there from Hornigold. Like I said, in season 3, every single actor, every single character is really given just a little bit of time to shine, even if it's just like an extra, let's say, 15 to 20 seconds on top of what they would usually get to really kind of illustrate the type of character they are and the way they perceive the world and the world perceives them, etc. We get, first of all, it's great to see Hornigold being smarter than we initially thought, that the Groot's plan to keep us hidden from the horizon, hidden by the horizon, didn't account for our spyglass actually giving away our position if it's a captain such as Hornigold that is as perceptive as he is to look for something like that. Then we got the dialogue continue, and we have Hornigold make it clear to us that Flint is a bit of a white whale for Hornigold's Moby Dick, in the sense that, well, the way he says it, in saying that, you know, for me, Flint was a character that rose from the dead just to thwart me again, and in noting how Sylvie murdered Dufresne just as an affront to all of that to begin with, and that he himself and Elle might have their history, but what's left with him and Flint is truly unresolved business, is great. It's great setup for how Hornigold is going to be an adversary for the succeeding episodes. But again, it also just does a great job of world building. It does a great job of characterization for Hornigold and why it is that he would exude so much effort towards thwarting Flint in the way that he does. That he truly views Flint as the gasoline fire that he needs to do his best to extinguish as quickly as possible, lest it burn the entire civilization to the ground. So, right before we get into the absolutely tour de force long take scene of the caravan being ambushed, we get the most amount of lore we've gotten about Jack Rackham than in the preceding 2.5 seasons of this show. And my God, what a tragic backstory. The fact that his family's business was ruined, their textile business was ruined, his father descended into alcoholism, that he as a 13-year-old boy had to do his best to manage both emotionally and financially. And when his father passed away, he was then basically given, I suppose you could even consider it a death sentence, not in the literal way, but just in the overall way of trying to survive as a human being, and that he has to literally pay for the sins of his father. And if he cannot garner the money, then he then has to give himself over to perform hard labor for the production of textiles. And we get so much backstory, and then so much of a rationale as to why it is Jack is doing the stuff that he's doing, why he wants the legacy of Jack Rackham to survive forever as a result of the enormous injustice that has been put upon him. And of course, so much of it is faith, the idea that the lawmakers chose wool over cotton, and that's why their family business fell. But again, for a 13-year-old boy to try to grasp all that and then have the rest of his life determined by that, we can completely understand why Jack is the person he is, and why he truly is using his wits to be a means to an end of putting his best foot forward in that kind of a sense. So yeah, again, then kind of ending that bit of the scene with Jack being quite accusatory towards Rogers and saying, you were born into wealth, you've had everything handed to you, and that's why you're in no position to criticize how me and Anne and everyone like us will go towards a possibility of making a future for ourselves, no matter how dire the possibility is, no matter how improbable it may seem. We will still gravitate towards us because we have had to work. And then for Rogers to dodge that notion altogether and say that all you know about me is the stuff that I want you to know. Again, harking back to the dialogue they had back in 306, I believe, is just another great way of bringing that full circle, and how Rogers and Jack have very much met their match with one another, and Jack making that quite explicit in saying that let it be known that even if I were to die, we were neck and neck, and I covered a lot of ground just to be able to meet you where you were at. Yeah, Jack, like, you can see why he's one of my favorites. And again, this type of scene was so necessary, I felt, for a character like Jack. Perhaps not necessary in a overall plot exposition sense of it, but with regards to world building and characterization, just getting that moment of backstory and vulnerability, you could almost say, for Jack as he is approaching a looming noose from his perspective, was just fantastic to be able to watch. So from a storytelling perspective, there isn't a huge amount necessarily to talk about from the caravan ambush scene. It is an action sequence, so like understandably there's not going to be a lot of exposition there, just more so the result of exposition. From a filmmaking point of view, that was 80 seconds of splendor, that entire long take, where they also very cleverly used the CGI transitions from when the camera dollies down from the wide shot outside to the close-up of the caravan window itself. The practical effects of the caravan wheel like coming off and tipping over, and then the push-in of Vane lifting himself down from the horse, taking the scarf away from his face, and continues to walk so determined that, I mentioned in the reaction itself, it very much reminded me of Children of Men. Again, it could also be, there was an entire episode of Mr. Robot where essentially the entire episode almost was presented as one continuous long take, where, again, similar to this scene here in Black Sails, they used the likes of CGI and visual trickery in order to make you believe that this is a completely uninterrupted shot. And whether or not you can or can't see where those bits are more obvious than others, it doesn't matter, because it's not about being magic. It's not about actually fully pulling the wool over your eyes. You know that it's filmmaking, it's production, it's make-believe. It's not about that. It's about creating this, it's creating this technical feat that is used as a means to an end of adhering to and creating visual storytelling. And Black Sails is not the type of TV show to do something showy unless it's warranted. In this case, it was warranted. They didn't have to do it, but the fact that they did for this type of story with this level of intensity, and so much of Black Sails is about the ethos of everything can really just change in a second. We got that in 209, for God's sake. So to have this particular plot point delivered in the continuous long take was so deserved and so apt and so brilliantly executed that it's, again, yet another highlight of this entire season. And then in the second half of that entire sequence, we see Jack and Anne make it out of harm's way. Vane, not so much. When I watched that episode for the first time, when the military were dragging him, I really thought they were actually just going to execute him there and then. But of course, I suppose they're not barbarians in that sort of a sense. They want to give him a fair trial and whatnot. Whether or not it is a fair trial is a different story. But nonetheless, I thought it was really sweet to see that moment of camaraderie between Vane and Jack and Anne. So then when Roger stands up and shoots him, I was fully convinced that Vane was going to die in that moment, which I would have been heartbroken over. Particularly, as I said many and many times before, that I loved the dynamic between Jack and Vane. So if I could have things my way, I would see that last all the way to the end of season 4. Be that as it may, I thought it was great to see Vane's value in that moment of how he's willing to be self-sacrificial in order for the overall plan to work in that moment where he lets Jack and Anne escape. And, having Rogers stand up and attack Vane is something that I should have seen coming, but nonetheless, it completely took me by surprise. I should have had the wheels in my head turn as soon as Flint says, "You'll be right behind us, won't you?" But, this is a show with a lot of twists and turns, so you can be forgiven for not always jumping to conclusions as to what is definitely going to happen, given the type of show that this is. But nonetheless, it was a great way to create a cliffhanger and a great way to add even more tension to a sequence that was already understandably very, very tense to begin with. We got a great sequence there between Sylvie and Maddie, in which Sylvie makes it clear that the issue with the crewman is totally put to bed, and of course we get the awful scene in which we see him being beaten by men in the middle of the night in order to make sure that he's not going to speak a word about what it is that went down. But again, it was a kind of a part 2 to Maddie giving us characterization about herself, whilst also making a message clear to Sylvie. She talks about how she was well within her right to have allowed her crewmen to enact revenge upon Sylvie's, given the fact that it was white men who murdered his parents when he was just a boy, and for him to accept this punishment administered by her, especially because they knew on each other for so long, is going to hurt both him and her in a way that Sylvie couldn't possibly understand. But she makes it clear that she would rather do things this way and put her own darkness to the side in order to secure a better outcome for everyone. So of course that's giving us characterization for her. It's giving us just a little bit more world building. Not that we necessarily need it, but it's still for her to make it very clear that it was men who looked like you who murdered his parents when he was a boy does reinforce the world building we have of the different lives led by those who are white and those who are black in this sort of world. And we get the characterization of how she is a person who is very aware of her emotions and aware of what she could do, but instead chooses to do what must be done instead, even if she's going to suffer for that fact. So it works on that level of the surface, but then of course we have the subtext of her saying saying to Sylvie that you have the same darkness within you, and it is your responsibility to put that darkness to the side in order to secure the future for all these men. So again, comparing and contrasting Sylvie to Flint in this episode 8 in comparison to episode 2, where Sylvie was so aware of the darkness that is brewing, that has brewed and continues to grow and manifest within Flint. And now he's at a particular crossroads where he is facing the same dilemma that has plagued Flint for so much time. The only difference being that for Sylvie, it's such a new feeling. So to have Maddie as a character in this story to be a voice of reason for Sylvie and his emotions and his subsequent actions is such a brilliant piece of writing. It's done in such a way where Maddie is, I suppose you could call her a supporting character or a helper character to Sylvie's storyline. But for her to then also be completely fleshed out in of herself and add to the world of Black Sails, and for her to have her own autonomy and for her to illustrate her own strength amidst all of this, for her to act as a true reference point for Sylvie as well as just a three-dimensional human being, it really shows how much these showrunners and these writers care about creating a real world with real characters for us to be engaged with. And after that, we get a short scene with Hornigold seeing that something is amiss, that Hornigold could actually see the spyglass from that far out, and they have to deal with Hornigold and his men a lot sooner than they thought they would possibly have to. Which, again, is just a great way of reinforcing the idea that actions do have consequences, and I love how the episodes in Black Sails will set up certain threads towards the beginning or middle of the episode, and then when they start to come into their own towards an episode's end, particularly as one particular plot arc will be at its end, such as that with Sylvie and Maddie sorting out the crewmen, and then for the middle of another thread to happen just right away after that is something that I just really, really love in this show when it happens. We get a short scene then between Max and Elle in which the dwindling numbers of their forces due to the sickness is really starting to take its toll. It's creating a sense of anxiety for both of them. They have the anxiety that if the caravan was attacked, then Spain will be at war with us. But for the external conflict, there is now more internal conflict plot-wise for them, in that you have the notion that there could be a spy within us. So it's not just the forces outside of our group that are threatening us, and now it's a threat from the inside. The call is coming from inside the house. So for there to be this level of exposition, for there to be this level of setup for the stakes that Max and Elle face, I just thought was like really exciting, and even more exciting on a rewatch, despite me knowing where the rest of the episode and the season goes. I can't help but just be caught up in the fear that Elle and Max have there. That's just so tangible, that level of tension. And of course, with that scene ending with Rogers showing up in the way that he looks, Elle has a lot to be concerned about at this particular point. We then have that fantastic scene on the beach in which, when Flint learns about Vane being captured by the militia, his immediate knee-jerk reaction is, we need to go get Vane. Having someone like Charles Vane hanging over the streets of Nassau at a time like this could be absolutely detrimental to our entire cause, like that show of weakness. To which Billy says, well, first of all, if you go off by yourself to try to do this, like, you are the one leading this war. We need our leader now more than at any other time. It's not going to work otherwise. And of course, Jack backs up that point, saying that if Vane knew you were even contemplating this, he'd come back and kill us all. And then Billy brings up the great point in that his parents were agitators. He knows what it's like to appeal to the common man, and that though we can't fight the militia by ourselves, certainly not with manpower or anything like that. It's not like we can just sneak into a prison cell and rescue him. It's impossible. What we can do is garner public support so that at the very least we will stand a chance of being able to rescue Vane when the time is right. So again, I think that adds great setup for the succeeding episode. It shows how important Vane is to their cause and how detrimental his death, his public execution, would be for their plan. But at the same time, it shows a degree of level-headedness that our group has to have, not only out of necessity, but also as a direct result of what Vane has instilled them to have within them. So I think again, having Vane at the front of the episode talking about that to seek comfort is to secure one's death sentence, essentially, and having that be a lesson that all of them have learned through Charles Vane, alongside valuing the larger plan over the comfort of the individual, is something that is then echoing back to what Maddie has been talking about to Sylvie as well. So a lot of the similar themes in the episode are kind of playing off one another and coming full circle in a way that I find very, very satisfying. And then we got the absolutely fantastic cliffhanger at the very end, which first of all begins with Rogers giving us the exposition of how, were it not for Elle taking the charge and making sure that Hornigold's fleet is out to thwart Flint's, that is just about giving us a chance to actually reclaim our power back. Because as it stands, if Flint were to succeed, then the next chapter will be chapters full of misery. He then... and again, so much of this is just absolutely excellent for Elle's character this season. We see Rogers asking Elle very directly that, I am fully aware as to your past with Nassau and how that has plagued you and how it has traumatized you, and that so much of the person you were when we first met was as a result of clinging to Nassau, and you spent so long with me now moving away from that, and now when I need you the most, it also coincides with where that gravitational pull is the absolute strongest. So he's truly illustrating that for Elle's character, she is now at a wall or a door with regards to Charles Vane. Either she is going to completely succumb to that gravitational pull and to cling to Nassau once more, and to cling with the trauma and the vengeance and all the negativity that coincides with Charles Vane, or she is going to find a way to truly move on and go through that door and enter the new life with Rogers. So given the fact that desperate times call for desperate measures, it's made clear by the ending of this episode that what Elle is faced with is presumably whether or not she is truly going to execute Charles Vane, because that seems to be the only way to wash her hands of all of this. And for everything that has happened between the two of them, she is at a crossroads of, should I execute him, should I not? And not just in, of course, the practical, pragmatic sense of what it means to their plot, but for her as a character, is she in a place where she can actually do this to Charles Vane? And the show does a really good job of it. And the fact that we had the previous episode with her really spilling her guts to Rogers was so necessary, because it makes the dialogue in this episode come across as very, very authentic and very believable. And again, just very organic for her character to say. There's a level of believability that we have as a result of her expressing her devotion to Rogers in the previous scene, that she's able to look Rogers right in the eye and say that I know you now, I trust you, I'm devoted to you, and I love you, and I can tell you from the deepest part of me, I honestly do not know what it is I'm going to do when I meet Charles Vane. And as the audience, we believe her. So for as much as we find out in this episode that Billy and his forces might be able to rescue Vane, regardless of whether or not Vane then is or isn't going to survive in the next 2 episodes, it's made very clear to us that he is truly on a knife's edge now with regards to his possibility of dying, given the fact that not only is this a decision Elle could make, it's a decision that she could make quite rashly out of her own emotional response, but it's also one that she could do in such a way where it could be quite brutal for Charles Vane. It's one she could make in a way that is very accelerated as well, whereas, you know, in the sense that if this is a case of he could get a fair trial, maybe she can do things in such a way where he won't receive a fair trial, as such, as a means to an end of her trying to secure a future for herself and Rogers as quickly as they can, one that can't happen unless she's able to let go of the baggage from the past, which itself cannot happen, which she's able to rid herself of Charles Vane, which cannot happen, presumably, if Charles Vane is left to live. And what an exciting cliffhanger that is. So once again, just absolutely loved this episode, as I have loved this season, as I have loved this entire series thus far. The caravan ambush was certainly a highlight. The rewatch definitely showed me things that I didn't pick up on right away, particularly with the Portugal bit I mentioned, and also with Maddie and Sylvie, all those bits I really, truly, truly enjoyed. And of course, a highlight of characterization for me this episode had to be the backstory with Jack and the lore we got there. So that's pretty much it. I want to thank you so much for watching this reaction. If you have made it all the way to the end, I would like to reward you with a fact. Did you know that in Japan, every single year on average, more paper is used to make manga than is used to make toilet paper? And there you go. That's your fun fact. Just a short little sweet one. So that's it. That's the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching.